Well, the United States has good reasons to want Taiwan as part of the balancing coalition it will build against China. There are also reasons to think this relationship is not sustainable over the long term. For starters, at some point in the next decade or so, it will become impossible for the United States to help Taiwan defend itself against the Chinese attacks. Remember, we are talking about a China that has much more military capability than it has today. Plus, geography works in China's favor in a major way, simply because Taiwan is so close to the Chinese mainland and so far away from the United States. When it comes to a competition between China and the United States over projecting military power into Taiwan, China wins hands down. Furthermore, in a fight over Taiwan, American policymakers would surely be reluctant to launch major attacks against Chinese forces on the mainland for fear it might precipitate nuclear escalation. This reticence would also work to China's advantage. One might argue that there's a simple way to deal with the fact that Taiwan will not have an effective conventional deterrent against China in the not-too-distant future. Put America's nuclear umbrella over Taiwan. This approach will not solve the problem, however, because the United States is not going to escalate to the nuclear level if Taiwan is being overrun by China. The stakes are not enough or not high enough to risk the general thermonuclear war. Taiwan is not Japan or even South Korea. Thus, the smart strategy for America is not even try to extend its nuclear deterrence over Taiwan. There's a second reason that the United States might eventually forsake Taiwan. It is an especially dangerous flashpoint, which could easily precipitate a Sino-American war that is not in America's interest. U.S. policymakers understand that the fate of Taiwan is a matter of great concern to Chinese of all persuasions. And they will be extremely angry if it looks like the United States is preventing unification. But that is exactly what Washington will be doing if it forms a close alliance with Taiwan. And that point will not be lost on the Chinese people. It is important to note in this regard that Chinese nationalism, which is a potent force, emphasizes how great powers like the United States humiliated China in the past when it was weak and appropriated Chinese territory like Hong Kong and Taiwan. Thus, it is not difficult to imagine crises breaking out over Taiwan or scenarios in which a crisis escalates into a shooting war. After all, Chinese nationalism will surely be a force for trouble in those crises. And China will at some point have the military wherewithal to conquer Taiwan, which will make war even more likely. There was no flashpoint between the superpowers during the Cold War that is as dangerous as Taiwan will be in a Sino-American security competition. Some commentators likened Berlin in the Cold War to Taiwan. But Berlin was not sacred territory for the Soviet Union, and it was actually of little strategic importance for either superpower. Taiwan is different, given how dangerous it is for precipitating a war, and given the fact that the United States will eventually reach the point where it cannot defend Taiwan. There is a reasonable chance American policymakers will eventually conclude that it makes good strategic sense to abandon Taiwan and allow China coerce it into accepting unification. All of this is to say that the United States is likely to be somewhat schizophrenic about Taiwan in the decades ahead. On one hand, it has powerful reasons to make Taiwan part of a balancing coalition aimed at China. On the other hand, there are good reasons to think that with the passage of time, the benefits of maintaining close ties with Taiwan will be outweighed by the potential costs, which are likely to be huge. Of course, for the near term, the United States will protect Taiwan and treat it as a strategic asset. But how long that relationship lasts is an open question. So far, the discussion about Taiwan's future has focused almost exclusively on how the United States is likely to act toward Taiwan. However, what happens to Taiwan in the face of China's rise also depends greatly on what policies Taiwan's leaders and its people choose to pursue over time. There's little doubt that Taiwan's overriding goal in the years ahead will be to preserve its independence from China. That aim should not be too difficult to achieve for the next decade, mainly because Taiwan is almost certain to maintain close relations with the United States, which will have powerful incentives as well as the capability to protect Taiwan. But after that point, Taiwan's strategic situation is likely to deteriorate in significant ways, mainly because China will be rapidly approaching the point where it can conquer Taiwan, even if the American military helps defend the island. And as noted, it is not clear the United States will be there for Taiwan over the long term. In the face of this grim future, Taiwan has basically three options. First, it can develop its own nuclear deterrent. Nuclear weapons are the ultimate deterrent, and there is no question that a Taiwanese nuclear arsenal would markedly reduce the likelihood of a Chinese attack against Taiwan. As most of you know, Taiwan pursued this option in the 1970s when it feared American abandonment in the wake of the Vietnam War. The United States, however, stopped Taiwan's nuclear weapons program in its tracks. And then Taiwan tried to develop a bomb secretly in the 1980s. But again, the United States found out and forced Taipei to shut the program down. It is unfortunate for Taiwan that it failed to build the bomb, because its prospects for maintaining its independence would be much improved if it had its own nuclear arsenal. One might argue that Taiwan still has time to acquire a nuclear deterrent before the balance of power in Asia shifts decisively against it. The problem with this suggestion is that both Beijing and Washington are sure to oppose Taiwan going nuclear. The United States would oppose Taiwan's nuclear weapons, not only because they would encourage Japan and South Korea to follow suit, but also because American policymakers abhor the idea of an ally being in a position to start a nuclear war that might ultimately involve the United States. To put it bluntly, no American wants to be in a situation where Taiwan can precipitate a conflict that might bring down a massive nuclear attack on the United States. China will adamantly oppose Taiwan getting a nuclear deterrent, in good part because Beijing surely understands that it would make it difficult, maybe even impossible, for China to conquer Taiwan. China will also recognize that Taiwanese nuclear weapons would facilitate nuclear proliferation in East Asia, which would not only limit China's ability to throw its weight around in the region, but would also increase the likelihood that any conventional war that breaks out would escalate to the nuclear level. For these reasons, China is likely to make it manifestly clear that if Taiwan pursues nuclear weapons, it will strike its nuclear facilities and maybe even launch a war to conquer the island. In short, it appears that it is too late for Taiwan to pursue the nuclear option. Taiwan's second option is conventional deterrence. I'm sure you are wondering how Taiwan can make deterrence without nuclear weapons work in a world where China has clear-cut military superiority over the combined forces of Taiwan and the United States. The key to success is not to be able to defeat the Chinese military. That's impossible. But instead, to make China pay a huge price to achieve victory. In other words, the aim is to make China fight a bloody and protracted war to conquer Taiwan. Yes, Beijing would prevail in the end, but it would be a Pyrrhic victory. This strategy would be even more effective if Taiwan could promise China that resistance would continue even after its forces were defeated on the battlefield. The threat that Taiwan might become another Xinjiang or Tibet would foster deterrence for sure. This option, I might note, is akin to Admiral von Tirpitz's famous risk strategy, which Imperial Germany adopted in the decades before World War I. Tirpitz accepted the fact that Germany could not build a navy powerful enough to defeat the mighty British Navy in battle. He reasoned, however, that Berlin could build a navy that was strong enough to inflict so much damage on the Royal Navy that it would cause London to fear a fight with Germany and thus be deterred. Moreover, Tirpitz reasoned that this risk lead might even give Germany diplomatic leverage it could use against Britain, although it was doomed to lose the fight with the British Navy. There are a number of problems with this form of conventional deterrence, which raise serious doubts about whether it can work for Taiwan over the long haul. For starters, the strategy depends on the United States fighting side by side with Taiwan. But it is difficult to imagine American policymakers purposely choosing to fight a war in which the U.S. military is not only going to lose, but is also going to pay a huge flood price. It is not even clear Taiwan would want to fight such a war, because it would be fought mainly on Taiwanese territory, not Chinese territory, and there would be death and destruction everywhere, and Taiwan would lose in the end anyway. Furthermore, pursuing this option means that Taiwan would be constantly arms racing with China, which would help fuel an intense security competition between them. The sword of Damocles, in other words, would always be hanging over Taiwan's head. Finally, although it is difficult to predict just how dominant China will become in the distant future, it is possible that it will eventually become so powerful that Taiwan will be unable to put up major resistance against any Chinese onslaught. This would certainly be true if America's commitment to defend Taiwan weakens as China morphs into a superpower. Taiwan's third option is what I call the Hong Kong strategy. In this case, Taiwan accepts the fact that it is doomed to lose its independence and become part of China. It then works hard to make sure that the transition is peaceful and that it gains as much autonomy as possible from Beijing. This option is unpalatable today and will remain so for at least the next decade. But it is likely to become more attractive in the distant future if China becomes so powerful that it can conquer Taiwan with relative ease. Let me now try to summarize where I think Taiwan stands with regard to these three options. Please remember that these options are based on the assumption that Taiwan can no longer defend itself in a conventional war with China, even with help from the United States. I believe the nuclear option is not feasible, as neither China nor the United States would accept a nuclear armed Taiwan. Conventional deterrence in the form of a risk strategy is far from ideal, but it makes sense as long as China is not so dominant that it can conquer Taiwan with relative ease. Of course, that strategy can only work if the United States remains committed to the defense of Taiwan, which is not guaranteed over the long term. Once China becomes a superpower, it probably makes the most sense for Taiwan to give up its hope of maintaining its de facto independence and instead pursue the Hong Kong strategy. This is definitely not an attractive strategy. But as Thucydides argued long ago, in international politics, the strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. It should be apparent from this discussion that whether Taiwan is forced to give up its independence largely depends on how formidable China's military becomes in the decades ahead. Taiwan will surely do everything it can to buy time and maintain the political status quo. But if China continues its impressive rise, Taiwan appears destined to become part of China. Let me conclude by pointing out that there is one way China can avoid the bleak future I have described in this talk. But Taiwan has no way of influencing events so that this outcome becomes a reality. Specifically, all Taiwanese should hope that there is a drastic slowdown in Chinese economic growth in the years ahead, and that Beijing also has serious political problems on the home front that both work to keep it focused inward. If that happens, China will not be in a position to pursue regional hegemony, and the United States will be able to protect Taiwan from China as it does now. In essence, the best way for Taiwan to maintain de facto independence is for China to be economically and militarily weak. When China started its impressive growth in the 1980s, most Americans and Asians thought this was wonderful news because all of the ensuing trade and other forms of economic intercourse would make everyone richer and happier. China, according to the reigning wisdom, would become a responsible stakeholder in the international community, and its neighbors would have very little to worry about. Many Taiwanese shared this optimistic outlook, and I would guess that some still do. But they are wrong. They are thinking about international politics in a fundamentally flawed way. By trading with China and helping it grow into an economic powerhouse, Taiwan has helped create a burgeoning Goliath with revisionist goals that include ending Taiwan's independence and making it an integral part of China. In sum, a powerful China is a nightmare for Taiwan.